As I mentioned, the Senate is continuing debate throughout today's program on their version of the National Defense Authorization Act. Earlier this month, the House passed a strong version of the NDAA, addressing many of the Biden administration's woke policies that distract our military from its core mission of fighting and winning wars. With Democrats in the Senate majority and the Biden administration threatening to veto bills that impede their woke agenda, what can we expect in the coming days? Well, joining me now to discuss this and more is Congressman Matt Gaetz. He serves on the House Armed Services Committee and the House Judiciary Committee. He represents the 1st Congressional District of Florida. Congressman Gaetz, welcome back to the program.
Thanks so much for having me, Tony. Appreciate being on with you.
So, Congressman, before we get to the NDAA, I want to get your take on the Senate advancing the nomination of General C.Q. Brown Jr. as the chair of the Joint Chiefs.
I would not have voted for the nomination of C.Q. Brown for this promotion that Joe Biden wants to give him. And the reason is that C.Q. Brown actually believes this radical DEI agenda that wants to turn our service members against their moms and dads, that embraces a radical gender ideology, and that at times promotes various versions of critical race theory. C.Q. Brown is someone who I think should not be in a position where he can perpetuate those things that we're working very hard to try to get out of our military so that they can focus on survivability, capability, and lethality.
So you pressed him on this when it came to the curriculum of the Air Force Academy and dropping the terms moms and dads. And his response was, well, you got to know who you're leading. That's a part of leadership. You got to know who you're leading. So what does that mean for all of those members of the military who have moms and dads? They're forgotten?
Right. That is what is so inherently divisive about the DEI agenda, is it excludes a great deal of people who, as a consequence of their immutable traits, you didn't get to choose whether or not you were born to a mom and dad who are still around. These are things that occur. Some people have a single parent family, some people don't. But I asked as a follow-up to General Brown, does he know anyone who's offended when they hear the term mom or dad? I know people who don't have both a mom and a dad, but I don't know that any of those people, whether they lost a parent or otherwise, would be offended if they heard someone else use that reference. But it goes far beyond that. What I'm worried about, Tony, is that increasingly we're seeing in this Department of Defense a desire to move mission out of red states, out of the Bible Belt, not because that's what's important for our national security, but because it's political retribution. You see, the DOD doesn't like Alabama's abortion policy, and so they're making it hard for us to get the Space Command set up in Huntsville. They might not like some of Florida's policies where we're not trying to indoctrinate youth on radical gender ideology in the 3rd grade, and we're starting to see them try to chip away at the things that we've done to grow our military mission. So I think all right-minded Americans should agree that the national defense should be spared this type of social justice warrior activity that C.Q. Brown and many others at the Pentagon seem to embrace.
Well, what was interesting in this, the Democrats, aided by the media, accused the Republicans of using the NDAA to advance this culture war that you made reference to. But you're just removing those items. Now, Chuck Schumer in the Senate says they're going to put them back in. Where does that leave the NDAA when it comes back over to the House?
But we're not going to authorize a woke military that works against the interests of our service members and their families. We're not going to authorize a military that doesn't put the defense of our nation first and paramount over all other concerns. We didn't choose this fight, Tony. I didn't have to offer an amendment that women shouldn't have to take showers with biological men because I chose that fight in the culture war. I had to offer that amendment because women stationed at military bases in my community said, we are uncomfortable showering with someone who has male genitalia. I mean, I can't even believe we're having to discuss this in polite company, right? But they chose to use the military in this very tortured way. And now we're just trying to right the ship. We're trying to get a course correction in place. So we would prefer the military totally be left out of the culture war, but that means they need to stop using taxpayer money to facilitate abortions through the military. That means that they shouldn't be robbing money that we appropriate if someone in our military has a child with Down syndrome or some other physical ailment, if they want to rob that money for a gender hormone replacement therapy. So that is what we're talking about. And I think most normal Americans would probably agree with us.
Right. I mean, it's very interesting. The left does this a lot, especially the Biden administration. You know, they stick a gun to your back and you try to disarm them and they call you the aggressor.
Right. And it's especially egregious when you see people being attacked because of immutable traits. There was one case, Tony, we had in committee where a chief DEI official was actually saying that people who were white weren't allowed to have certain opinions and perspectives about race, that just by virtue of being white, you were robbed of the opportunity for that discourse. And I want to get back to the values of Dr. Martin Luther King and the civil rights movement, that we should judge one another by the content of our character, not by immutable traits like the color of our skin. There was a failed DEI episode at the Department of Defense. Lloyd Austin wanted all of the photographs taken off of officer promotion packets because he said, well, if you look at someone's photograph, you would be enslaved by your own bias. And the result after that change wasn't a more diverse officer corps, it was a less diverse officer corps. So actually, we are pretty good people. We are not a racist country. We don't have a racist military. I think for the most part, we've got patriotic Americans working to do their duty. And we don't want what seems to have infected corporate America and so much of the federal bureaucracy to now be a cancer on our beloved military.
Right. It's as they are fueling what they say they are against. I want to go to another topic very quickly before we run out of time, Congressman Gaetz. Last night, Speaker McCarthy suggested publicly for the first time that the evidence is rising to the level for potential impeachment inquiry into the president. What would it take for us to get to that point?
I think we're there already, but I don't put much stock in Speaker McCarthy's words on that point, because Speaker McCarthy, before his ascendance to the speakership, said we were going to open an impeachment inquiry into Mayorkas, and we haven't done that. And then weeks ago, he said that the IRS whistleblower information justified an impeachment inquiry into Merrick Garland, and then we didn't do that. And now he is largely analyzing evidence that we've had for some time about these bank payments from the Chinese through pass-throughs to the Biden family. And he's saying, well, maybe we should impeach Joe Biden. It just kind of sounds like a lot of talk to me. I'm going to continue dogged oversight work, but you hit the nail on the head in the monologue. Follow the money. Okay, talk is cheap. I want to know if we're going to continue to send money to these agencies of government that push critical race theory, that try to divide people from their parents, that try to turn young folks against a nation that is the greatest in all of human history. And if we do that, and if we stay focused on the money, then I think we can actually get wins for our people. If we give airy talk every few months when it's politically convenient to gaslight impeachment inquiries, I don't know that that's been a successful endeavor for us.
Well, you're right. Congress has the purse strings, so we're going to see real soon what happens. Congressman Matt Gaetz, thanks so much for joining us. Always great to see you.
Thank you, Tony. Appreciate being on.